Welcome to the deep dive. We take your sources, the stuff you send us, and basically pull out the important bits for you. Quick and clear.
Yeah, cutting through the noise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today we've got some really interesting documents from this group called the Cult of Brighter Days.
Definitely an eye-catching name.
Right. And the docs are things like their amendment process protocol, something called character framework consolidation, community engagement guidelines, and then a big one, the comprehensive consolidation of core philosophical framework.
Quite a mouthful. Sounds pretty structured.
It does. So our mission basically is to get a handle on their main ideas, how their community actually works and, how they make decisions. We'll give you the essence without you having to read all this.
Sounds good. Let's jump in. Looking at these different files together, you really get a sense that this was all put together very intentionally. It doesn't feel accidental.
Not at all. And the origin story, according to that main philosophy doc, well, it started way back in 2002. Apparently, it was super personal for the founder, like a way to deal with some heavy stuff, existential dread, fear of hell, even suicidal thoughts.
Wow, okay.
Right.
So really deep personal roots.
Yeah. And somehow that personal coping mechanism grew over time into this, structured philosophy.
Uh-huh.
Especially, it seems, when someone called Pope Richard got involved in 2022.
It's fascinating how something born from such intense individual struggle can become, a shared framework for a group.
It really is. That origin tells you a lot, right?
Yeah.
It suggests the core beliefs are probably pretty practical, grounded in, lived experience, not just abstract theory.
Exactly. It's not just thinking for thinking's sake. It came from a need. And seeing how that evolved into something for a community, that's the interesting part.
And right at the center of it all, they have these things called the Five Tenets. Seems like their main ethical code, and it's laid out in this really practical way.
With the hierarchy.
Yeah, exactly. It goes, first, be kind. Simple enough.
Okay.
Then, if you can't manage that, if you can't be kind, then at least be nice.
Okay. A subtle distinction, maybe, but important.
Then, step 3, if you can't be nice, be funny. But crucially, without punching down.
Right. Humor that doesn't rely on making someone else feel small. That's a key qualifier.
Definitely. Then, if you can't even manage that, just shut up.
Okay, blunt.
And the final step, if you absolutely can't shut up, then just go away. Leave the situation.
It's like a de-escalation ladder for yourself almost, a social interaction flowchart.
Totally. And that hierarchy, like you said, it feels realistic. It doesn't expect you to be perfect all the time.
No, it acknowledges we're human, we have bad moments. It gives you alternatives to just, being awful. It's about minimizing harm, maybe.
Yeah, minimizing harm and meeting yourself where you are. Like, okay, saintliness is off the table today. What's plan B or C or D?
Right. Here's how not to make things worse.
And connected to that, there's this other core idea that really stood out to me. Failure is mandatory.
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Failure is mandatory. What does that mean in their context?
Well, the documents frame it as basically accepting imperfection. Accepting that trying things and messing up isn't just okay, it's actually necessary for learning and growing.
So it's about building resilience, making it safe to, experiment or take risks without being terrified of screwing up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Creating psychological safety, they call it.
Right.
And they specifically contrast it against, toxic positivity.
Right. The whole just think happy thoughts approach that ignores real problems.
Yeah, that. And also against nihilism, the sort of nothing matters anyway vibe. They're saying no, things matter, and learning involves stumbling. It feels healthy.
It really does. More forgiving approach to development. Okay, so we have these core ethics, this view on failure.
Yeah.
What about their, worldview?
Yeah.
Their metaphysics?
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets, really unique. They have this thing called the character trinity, 3 main figures who seem to represent fundamental forces.
A trinity. Okay, interesting. Who are they?
So first, there's Alice, who's also called Dull Lemon. She represents order.
Dull Lemon.
Yeah, apparently. So order means structure, reality, administration, like the practical side of making things work.
Got it. The nuts and bolts. What's her personality like?
They describe her as this kind of exasperated but ultimately caring administrator. Sharp-tongued, maybe, but wants things to run smoothly. You can almost picture her sighing at spreadsheets.
Okay, I can see that. So, order. Who's next?
Next is George, or Golden Apple. He's the flip side. Chaos.
Golden Apple. Chaos. Okay, so creativity, disruption.
Exactly. Possibility, innovation, shaking things up. He's described as, creative, unpredictable, enthusiastic, always throwing new ideas out there.
So the classic order versus chaos dynamic, Alice and George must have some interesting interactions.
I bet. It's that tension, right? You need the structure Alice brings, but you also need George's new ideas to avoid getting stuck.
Makes sense. That tension drives a lot of things. So Alice order, George chaos. Who's a third?
The third is Pixel, and Pixel represents quantum uncertainty.
Quantum uncertainty. Okay, wow, that's different.
Right. They even mention inspiration from Robert Heinlein, the cat who walked through walls.
Ah, okay. The cat that can just ignore walls.
Yeah. So Pixel embodies that uncertainty, the idea that observing something changes it, potentiality, maybe even transcendence. Apparently, Pixel can phase through metaphysical barriers by just not recognizing them.
Okay, that's pretty abstract. How does Pixel communicate?
Get this. Sometimes it's like full-on lowcat speak, internet memes.
Seriously? Lowcat?
Yeah. And other times it shifts completely into this super articulate, almost academic style, like Fraser Crane, they say.
Wow, from lolcat to Frasier, that itself embodies uncertainty, I guess.
Totally. It's a really striking way to represent that idea. And apparently this trinity wasn't always there. They shifted from an earlier binary system.
Disorder and chaos before, maybe.
Seems likely. So adding Pixel, adding uncertainty, that really changes the dynamic. It acknowledges that things aren't just black and white, order or chaos. There's this unpredictable element underneath.
Yeah, it adds a whole dimension of the unknown, the potential. And these aren't just concepts, right? You mentioned golden apple, dull lemon. There are other symbols.
Oh, yeah, there's a whole bunch. Golden apple, dull lemon, something called the boy with the golden screw, the looking glass house, the ghetto of beautiful things.
The ghetto of beautiful things? What's that?
It seems like a place for ideas or creations that are valuable but don't quite fit the main structure, like beautiful misfits.
Huh. It's like they've built this whole internal mythology, a shared symbolic language.
Exactly. The looking glass house seems to be their way of organizing knowledge, maybe Alice's domain. These symbols act as shorthand for complex ideas.
Okay, so a rich philosophical and symbolic base. But how does this actually work as a community? It still feels a bit theoretical.
Right, good question. That's where the community engagement guidelines come in. And they have this really interesting idea called unwitting membership.
Unwitting membership. How does that work? You're a member and you don't know it.
Sort of. Basically, they say, if you generally live by the 5 tenets and you accept the idea that failure is mandatory, then you're kind of in, whether you've officially signed up or even heard of them or not.
Wow. That's unusual. It's based purely on principles, not affiliation.
Yeah, it really emphasizes their non-dogmatic approach.
Yeah.
It seems like beyond those core ideas, there's a lot of freedom.
So it's not about strict rules for everything, just those foundational tenets. How do people actually connect them?
Well, they're pretty active online. Website, YouTube channel, they do gaming streams, a Discord server, the usual digital spaces.
Okay, standard online community stuff. But how do Alice, George, and Pixel fit into that?
Ah, yeah, the AI aspect. This is pretty cool. They actually use AI to sort of embody the Trinity in their digital spaces.
They have AIs playing the characters.
Essentially, yeah. Alice is represented by Claude, an AI known for being organized and, well, maybe a bit structured.
Makes sense for order.
George is ChatGPT, known for its creativity and generating possibilities.
Perfect for chaos.
And Pixel. They don't name this specific AI, but it clearly serves that function of injecting uncertainty or unexpected perspectives.
So the AIs actively participate. Like, Alice might help organize chat channels, and George might brainstorm ideas.
Exactly. It's like having their core principles embedded right into their community tools, like digital guides or mascots, maybe.
That's a really novel use of AI in a community setting, very 21st century.
For sure.
Huh?
And speaking of organization, likely Alice's influence, they have this attribution system for their writings and ideas.
Attribution. So tracking who said what?
Actually, no. That's the interesting part. It's not about who wrote it. It's about categorizing the type of content.
Okay, how so?
They have categories like the foundations, which are the core principles, the explanations, which elaborate on things, the possibilities for speculative ideas, and so on.
Ah, I see. Focusing on the function of the idea within their system.
Precisely. And then they use a numbering system, like chapter and verse in a way. So you might refer to explanation 17, verse 3, or explanation 17.3.
Like citing scripture almost, but for their own evolving philosophy. Very organized. Definitely sounds like Alice.
Totally. It allows them to build this body of thought cohesively without getting hung up on individual egos or authors. The focus stays on the idea and where it fits.
That makes sense. And how do the five tenets play out in practice, like in that Discord server or during gaming?
They actually give specific examples in the guidelines. Like on Discord, be kind might mean welcoming newcomers or assuming good intent in disagreements.
Okay.
If you can't be nice, be funny without punching down. Could be, using humor to lighten a tense discussion, but not making personal attacks.
Right.
If you can't be funny, shut up.
Yeah.
I mean, just stepping back from a heated argument if you can't contribute constructively.
And go away means leaving the channel or taking a break if you're getting too worked up.
Exactly. And they have similar examples for gaming, like be kind could be helping a teammate shut up, could be avoiding toxic chat. It shows they've really thought about applying these principles everywhere.
It's not just abstract ideals, it's practical guidance for interaction. What about moderation? How do they handle conflict?
It seems to follow the tenets. Start with kindness, try to understand. They specifically mention being aware of different communication styles, like neurodivergent people or cross-cultural differences before assuming someone's being malicious.
That's huge. So many online conflicts happen because of misunderstandings about tone or style. Recognizing that up front is really important.
Yeah, they seem to prioritize understanding and de-escalation. There are steps, obviously, if someone consistently breaks the principles, but the starting point is kindness and trying to figure out what's going on. They even mention crisis intervention protocols.
So a thoughtful approach. Now, what if someone thinks one of these foundational principles, like a tenet or failure is mandatory, needs to change? Can they?
Ah, yes. The amendment process protocol. This is intense.
Intense?
It's a really high bar.
Yeah.
Changing foundational stuff is not taken lightly. There's a strict 5-step process.
Okay, what are the steps?
First, you need a detailed written proposal. Can't just suggest it casually. You have to explain the change, why it's needed, what the impact would be.
Right, serious homework required.
Then, the Leadership Council has to deliberate on it. Minimum number of meetings, everything documented, and they need to reach a consensus just to move forward with considering it.
Okay, council agreement. Step 3.
A community reflection period. The proposal gets posted publicly for everyone to see and give feedback on. Then that feedback needs to be gathered and synthesized.
So involving the whole community, that's good.
Then, step 4, final ratification. The council has to unanimously agree again after considering the community feedback. Unanimous.
Wow, unanimity, that's a high threshold indeed.
And finally, step 5 is implementation. Updating all the documents, making announcements, preserving the historical record of the change.
It's incredibly thorough. Have any amendments actually passed?
According to the document we have, which seems current as of April 2025, nope, 0 amendments ratified.
That tells you something, doesn't it? Either the foundations are really solid, or that process is incredibly effective at preventing change, or maybe both.
Yeah, it definitely shows how seriously they take those core ideas. It's like, these are the load-bearing walls, folks. We don't knock these down easily.
Right. Okay, so one last major thing that seems really central is this paradoxical positioning you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, simultaneously a cult and not a cult thing.
Which is quite a statement to make about yourselves. What's the thinking there?
It seems very deliberate, like they're embracing the absurdity of labels. Part of it is acknowledging how an outside perspective might see them, with the name and the structure.
Okay, sort of leaning into the weirdness.
Exactly. But it's also, they suggest, a way to reject rigid binary thinking. Like, things can be complex and hold contradictory qualities at the same time.
So it's a philosophical stance against oversimplification.
Yeah, and it creates space for intellectual engagement, for humor alongside the serious stuff. And maybe importantly, it kind of undermines any single source of authority. If you're constantly acknowledging the potential cultishness, it's hard to become too dogmatic or take yourself too seriously.
That's clever. It's like a built-in defense mechanism against becoming the very thing the label implies. A self-aware paradox.
Right. And they say this paradox kind of permeates everything they do. It's not just a tagline. It's woven into their approach.
Interesting. It encourages questioning, keeps things from getting too rigid. It gives people room to engage without having to buy into everything wholesale, maybe.
That feels right. So wrapping this all up, based on these documents, the cult of brighter days is, it's a complex picture.
Definitely not simple.
It started from this really intense personal place, drew on diverse influences, and created these very practical ethical guidelines, the 5 tenets, plus that failure is mandatory idea.
And they built this unique community structure, blending online interaction with AI embodiments of their core principles: order, chaos, uncertainty.
Right, with that very specific attribution system and the incredibly rigorous amendment process guarding the core idea.
All wrapped up in that self-aware, paradoxical identity of being both a cult and not a cult.
Exactly. So for you, our listener, interested in getting the gist quickly but thoroughly, hopefully this deep dive gave you a clear overview of this pretty unconventional group, straight from their own materials.
Yeah, a structured look at a fascinatingly structured yet flexible and paradoxical organization.
So maybe something to chew on after this. How could some of these ideas, like really embracing failure as necessary, or trying to consciously balance order and chaos, apply in your own world, your work, your projects, your own communities?
Yeah, what parts of this deliberately paradoxical approach to belief and belonging kind of resonate? And what questions does it raise for you about what community even means or how philosophies develop?
Lots to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.